Guy, you wanted to ask about Russia, so go ahead.
Thank you. The Russian government has announced that it has moved to make Russian military casualties classified. Is that a development that bodes well for this department's consistent calls for transparency from Moscow over Russian military support for separatists in Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're certainly aware of the law. We're aware of it, and we see this as a misplaced effort to cover up what everyone knows, and that is that Russian active duty military personnel are fighting and dying in eastern Ukraine, and that the Russian government is denying it. It's been widely reported that before crossing the border, Russian troops often remove the insignia from their uniforms. They leave behind passports and other forms of identification. They paint their vehicles to remove Russian flags and other identifying emblems. All of this is to hide the direct involvement in eastern Ukraine of Russia. As we talked about last week, the OSCE interviewed two Russians captured by Ukrainian forces who admitted that they were members of the Russian military, and yet the most recent example. So we also see this law as a blow to free press, and we think a free and independent press is an essential component of civil society, and we would urge Russia to embrace the spirit of the Helsinki principles that Russia, the United States, and all of our European counterparts signed on to 40 years ago. Yeah,
sorry, I'm a little confused. The merits,
just a moment,
the merits of what you're saying aside, whether or not there are Russian troops in it, why is it any of the United States' business what the Russian government chooses to classify and not classify? I mean, this administration has classified, and previous administrations have classified innumerable things that have come under, that have been harshly criticized by people who are advocates for freedom of the press and freedom of transparency, things that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. Why is it any of the United States business what the Russian government decides should be classified information or not?
Well, I'd say two things. First of all, as I said, we consider a free press important and people's access to information important. Again, freedom of speech, freedom of the press are human rights, and we consider those important.
Okay, so the administration believes now that the classification of documents is an infringement on freedom of the press, because if it does, well, I think it should take a look in the mirror, because there's a lot of. But
let me finish. So the other part of your question, though, is I think we can't separate this from the context. If this is a context in which Russian forces are on the territory of a sovereign neighbor, Ukraine, where they are working with, allied with, aiding and fighting alongside separatists whom Russia also backs on sovereign Ukrainian territory. So we've spoken at length about that, and in our view, this law appears to be an attempt simply to make it more difficult for those facts, which again relate to the sovereignty of a UN member state, Ukraine, to be covered over.
Right, but you're making a comment about what the Russian government chooses to classify and not classify. This government has classified lots of things to prevent. Let's talk about the NSA and the Snowden leaks and that kind of thing. This government has been engaged in activities, intelligence gathering activities overseas that it has chosen to classify and wants to prosecute. So I'm not sure I understand how it is that you're able to make how it is that you're able to say what it is that you're saying with moral authority here when this administration, this government, the U.S. government, seems to do the same thing.
Well, again, there are, of course,
obviously in different contexts than Ukraine, but I mean.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's denying that classifying the government's classifying information. It's something that all governments do,
right?
And it's
their prerogative.
function. But again, in our view, it seems pretty clear that the purpose of this legislation is directly related to Russia's involvement in Ukraine, and that's why I've said what I've said about it. Yes, in the back, and then we'll come forward.